Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. No matter where you are located in the world, the UCLA Center for Middle East Development would like to welcome you to our fourth episode of a unique monthly series called CMED Chats. My name is Haleh Esfandiari. I'm CMED's project manager and very excited to have you here with us today for a very special episode. The CMED Chat series engages charismatic guests who are from the Middle East and North Africa, or who are connected to the region in some capacity. Our equally engaging hosts will vary throughout the series to keep the conversations diverse. Together, they will sit down for one-on-one casual chats that cover a variety of topics and highlight the many voices and realities that enrich the colorful region we lovingly know as MENA. All CMED Chats episodes will be recorded and can be viewed on CMED's website or YouTube page within 24 hours of this broadcast. We will not be accepting audience questions for our live guests. However, if you have any logistics questions, feel free to let us know in the Q&A window located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And without further ado, I will pass the microphone to Manny Jad, CMED's Deputy Director. Manny is co-creator of the UCLA Center for Middle East Development and has been pivotal in its growth since its inception in 2005. Not only is Manny the Chief Administrative and Financial Officer of the center, but she is its heart and soul, acting as the point of contact for donors and sponsors, liaising with the UCLA and CMED community, and stepping in for the director when he is not available. Manny graduated from Loyola Marymount University with a degree in psychology, speaks fluent Arabic, and is well connected in the region. Manny, take it away.
Thank you, Salome, for your kind words. And welcome everyone to the CMED Chats program. When we first decided to create this program, I had Haleh June, as I like to call her, be one of the guests that I wanted to be on the program. I've known Haleh June for almost 20 years, and within the first year of our friendship, she took me under her wing and never looked back. Haleh was the first person I thought of again when we decided to do the CMED Chats program, and I'm humbled that she accepted our invitation without any hesitation. By the way, it's my first time, so please be gentle. And without any further delay, let me introduce you to Haleh Esfandiari. Haleh was the founder and director of the Middle East program at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. She is currently a Middle East program and public policy scholar at the Wilson Center. She's the author of My Prison, My Home, based on her arrest and imprisonment by the Iranian security authorities in 2007. In March 2017, the Wilson Center announced the launch of the Haleh Esfandiari Forum, an annual lecture on women's empowerment in the MENA region. The inaugural lecture was given by former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. Among her awards are the Special American Red Cross Award and the Women's Equality Award from the National Council of Women's Organizations. Haleh also received an honorary degree from Georgetown University Law Center. Welcome, Haleh, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Mani. Yes, we have known each other for 20 years, but it's always a pleasure to be with you. I'm looking forward to our chat, but I must say that I feel my generation has passed the torch to your generation, which is wonderful to see you so interested in women's issues. I also would like to thank Salome, and also to say what a pleasure it was to see Steve briefly after quite a while. Okay, I'm at your disposal. It's an honor and a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, Habibi. Let's address the elephant in the room and start with your time in Evin prison, which was, to put it mildly, very harrowing. It was just a few days ago that you celebrated your 14th year anniversary of the release. When I found out what had happened, I know personally I was shocked and devastated and completely worried about you. Would you mind talking to me about your time there? What was the experience like? How did you manage to stay alive in such harsh conditions? And do you think that you'll ever go back to Iran?
there are, for everybody, Manny, there are certain days in their lives that they always remember. It's usually birthdays, anniversaries, this and that. In my case, I don't think I will ever forget the morning of May 8, 2007, when I had gone for my interrogation to the Ministry of Intelligence in Iran. And this interrogation was going on for 3 months. And then I was told that I should make a call to my mother and tell her that they are taking me to Evin prison. This really came as a shock to me. I mean, because I'm a student of Iran, I'm familiar with what was going on at Evin and continue to follow the development of prisoners, especially dual nationals and women activists in prison. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go, they are taking me in, but what will happen to me? So let me tell you briefly what happened to me for 105 days. I was taken to a cell. I was in solitary confinement for 105 days. I only saw one of the two interrogators, because I had always was asked to sit facing the wall, not to see the main interrogator. I had a principal interrogator and the junior interrogator. The junior interrogator was my unwelcome companion for all the 8 months I was kept under country arrest in Iran. The interrogation started immediately. I was sometimes in interrogation for 8 hours or 9 hours a day. And they would ask all sorts of questions. I mean, and I think their aim was to exhaust me so much.
Definitely.
So that I would just cave in and just say, okay, what do you want me to say? I will say it and just let me be. But I didn't do that. I mean, I feel I'm a strong woman, and and I'm a disciplined person. So I decided, okay, I'm going to go along with this question and answer charade for as long as it takes. And let's not think of being free. They might keep me forever. And also, I decided that I need to put my family out of my mind, because I couldn't think about them and be focused on what was happening in prison. So after the interrogation, I would come and pace up and down in my cell and start going over the question and the answers, because the tactic was to come back to the same question 2 weeks later and try and figure out whether there was a discrepancy in it and catch you. They never tortured me, but they brought I was under a lot of mental pressure.
I'm sure.
Mental pressure, threatening me that they are going to put me on trial. I never was put on trial. I was never charged. I was accused, but never charged.
What were you accused of, Haleh?
I was accused of trying to, of endangering the security of the Islamic Republic. Can you imagine a woman who was wearing barely 100 pounds was going to endanger the mightiest country in the region, number one. Number two, I was also accused of being a spy. So one day when they were accusing me, they said, you work for Mossad, you work for MI5, and you work with the CIA. I said, look, I mean, there should be a limit to your fantasies. Decide which one you want to aspire for, and then we can have a discussion, So that was, and this went on for 105 days. And, I had once a visit by my mother towards the end of my stay.
Okay.
They allowed her to come and see me. She was 94 years old, so she was allowed to come with a cousin, and in the presence of the guards, we exchanged some, some just platitude, really. How are you? I'm doing well. What about you? How is my family? And so on. And I was able to call her twice a week, but all my life I had spoken to my mother in German because she was Austrian. I was told I have to speak to her in Persian. And she was, my link to the outside world. As soon as I would speak to her, she would call my husband, Shaul Bakhash, who was luckily on sabbatical and could spend a lot of time trying to get me out of prison, and tell him word for word what I said. And, it was a horrible time. I never cried in front of them. They tried to make me cry. And if I wanted to cry, I would cry under the shower. Because there was a peephole in the door. The door was locked, the door of my cell, and the women warden would come and check regularly on you. So it really was a horrible, horrible time. And I just, I was very fortunate, Manny, to let go. They let me finally go, because my release came as a surprise, just as my arrest came as a surprise. They came one afternoon and said, pack your stuff and go. And I said, where? I worried they are going to move me to another prison, because that was what they were doing. They said, no, you can go home, but we won't let you go back to the US to your family. You can go to your mother's house. I was thankful for that. But within 10 days, they must have changed their mind, because I received a phone call and said, get your passport and go get a ticket and leave the country. And, me being cynical, I said, well, unfortunately, you confiscated my passport. Must be in one drawer in the intelligence. so the guy said, okay, meet me tomorrow morning at 8 at the passport office. So they issued a new passport for me, and I was able to leave. But I insisted, Manny, that my interrogator should come to the airport with me, because I was familiar with their trips. They announced that I had left the country, but another group would arrest me. Yeah. I said, no, I won't go to the airport unless you come with me. And in prison, I managed to keep myself busy. I wrote 2 books in my mind, because I didn't get a paper or pencil. So I wrote a storybook for my grandchildren, who were then 5 and 3 and now are in college. And
Mashallah.
Also a biography of my paternal grandmother, who had a lot of influence on me. I mean, she taught me what the real Islam is, and she also taught me Persian poetry.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Your last part of the question, unfortunately, Manny, I don't think I will be able to go back to Iran. I mean, they would welcome me with a red carpet, but they will take me back to Evin.
So there are current prisoners in Evin, one of which is Siamak Namazi. And he's been in there for quite a while. what do you think is happening to him now? And is he ever going to be released, do you think?
Every time, there is a swap of prisoners between the United States and Iran, I hope and pray that Siamak and other dual nationals would be part of the swap. So far, he hasn't been lucky. I really think that they must bear a personal grudge against him because he was the most gentle person. You knew him, you met him, a nationalist. He would speak at the Wilson Center, always encouraging people to come to Iran, to do business with Iran, and he was not political at all.
No.
And to this day, I don't understand why he was arrested, why his father was arrested, and why the other dual nationals are arrested. They arrested a bunch of environmentalists. One of them is a dual national, just because they were serving the cause in Iran. They were working on environmental issues in Iran. So there is, and also look at these women, the women activists in Iran, women like Nasrin Sotoudeh, Narges Mohammadi, and many others. I mean, they have talked about equality under the law, respect for human rights, respect for women's rights. They haven't committed any crime, nothing, and they haven't endangered the security of the Islamic Republic. But nevertheless, they serve in jail with these absurd long sentences, 10 years or 15 years for just removing your scarf in public. So it's a terrible story when it comes to what happens in Evin. And I think there is a big difference. I was in the hand of the intelligence ministry. The people who were arrested after 2009 are in the hand of the Revolutionary Guards intelligence unit. I don't think they are accountable to anybody.
It's a very depressing state of affairs, to be honest. Let's talk about the state of women in our beloved region. To put it mildly, it's very depressing. As you mentioned a few days ago when we spoke, we've taken one step forward and two steps back in terms of, social change and women's empowerment. And given that the majority of the countries in the region have a high population of people under the age of 30, how do you envision the region's future? Are you optimistic that the next generation will affect the necessary changes?
By nature, I'm an optimist, really. And I have a lot of faith and confidence in the younger generation in our region. There is a big difference, I think, between this generation and when I grew up. The majority of the younger generation are educated these days in the region. Secondly, they are connected through social media, and that makes a big difference. They can interact with each other and they can follow each other's examples, how to introduce change, how to resist the governments, who impose on them, how to push for equality under the law, how to go for leadership position, managerial positions, how to help each other. And I'm talking about basically at this point women, but the men of this generation are equally dedicated to bring change. And I think they will, no matter how autocratic the regimes are, they are the force for change. And I always look at the example of Iran. Women have stood up to this regime for the last 40 years. And every single change that took place was because women were behind it. For example, raising the age of marriage from 9 to 13 for girls. It's still terrible. There was recently a UN report which complained or blamed Iran for having a substantial number of early marriages for girls between the age of 10 and 14, which I think is criminal, basically.
It is
But
criminal.
nevertheless, so I'm very optimistic, and I think with a bit of patience, the younger generation will achieve what my generation basically was not able to achieve. But the Middle East is not homogeneous, you know that. We have wars. I mean, and if you are in a state of war, your priorities are very different. A substantial number of women and girls are part of the refugee communities. And
Definitely, yeah.
Cannot go to school. So, you know, when I say I'm an optimist and I hope that this generation will bring change, I mean the generation who is now in countries with stable governments.
There's not that many of those, unfortunately.
No.
So going along the same lines then, what role do you think the Iranian government or the new Iranian government can play in women's empowerment or even just rights? Do you expect more of the same, or do you envision any new reforms perhaps?
Well, you know, Mr. Raisi is a very conservative person, and he carries a lot of baggages, you know, human rights violations and so on. He introduced this cabinet. There was not a single woman in that cabinet. Actually, in the last 40 years, the only president, oddly enough, who dared to nominate a woman to his cabinet and parliament ratified the nomination was President Ahmadinejad, who appointed the former woman MP, doctor, as his Minister of Health. And eventually he fired her because she didn't go along with his policies. So far, we have not had any woman in the cabinet. And Mr. Raisi, I think, is following the example of his predecessor. But his predecessors all appointed either 3 or sometimes 4 or 2 women vice presidents. Vice presidents in Iran, their appointment is the prerogative of the president. So it doesn't have to be ratified by parliament. So far, he has, as far as I know, he hasn't appointed a single woman as his vice president. I'm curious to see what he's going to do with the position of vice president for women and children's affairs in Iran, which, you know, we just have to wait and see. I think the first probably 6 to 8 months, he will not deal with women's issues because he has other problems like the economic situation, the sanctions, COVID. But after that, I mean, we shall see what it will look like. But the women are not going to give up. Already the women activists have written about him, have written about their condition in jail, have written about the violation against women. So the women activists will continue bringing pressure on him, but we will see what he will do.
Is it don't you think, I feel for the women activists in Tehran because they see that their colleagues have been imprisoned. Is there a fear that you shouldn't step too far over the red line, so to speak? Are they being critical, or are they just being critical enough, if that makes any sense?
Actually, Mani, these Iranian women activists are fearless. I really am just in awe about their courage, their bravery, and I don't think that the current president, Raisi, will intimidate him. I mean, they haven't been intimidated by being arrested, by sent to prison, sentenced to 15 years, 10 years, 30 years. I mean, all you name it, they have been sentenced to. They are not. I think they have dedicated their lives to the cause. Mm-hmm. And whether they are in jail or outside the jail, they continue this pattern.
Well, that's good to hear. We need fearless women. We need, semi-fearless women. As long as we speak up, I think we can be a force of change for sure. Well, I think I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about Afghanistan and the growing fear that the Taliban will retaliate against the women and girls there. And my concern is that the strides that they have made in the past 20 years have come to an end. What do you think will happen to Afghani women and girls, given that the Taliban are saying, "Oh, we're a brand new Taliban. We're more we're more open to things." But what are those things? I'm not quite sure yet.
I mean, personally, I'm very worried for the future of Afghani women. Mm-hmm. And I think the Taliban showed their true nature from 1996 to 2001. Mm-hmm. For us who followed closely then the plight of women in Afghanistan, we remember women taken to the stadium and being flogged. Mm-hmm. We remember women being reduced to poverty, sitting in the street corner under their burqa, begging. We remember young girls being barred from schooling. So no matter what the Taliban say today, they have to prove it. And look, already yesterday, they announced that women should not report to work because they are saying it for their own safety, the women's safety. And the excuse was that some of the Talibs who are around town and walking with the gun, they don't know anything about, women's rights and women working. And so they might commit violence against these women. So therefore they have to, it's better if women stay at home. So women stay at home, don't report to work. Girls stay at home, don't go to school, because there is a danger that these Taliban who don't know anything will set fire to your school. I mean, they can stop that. The leadership can stop that.
They can, definitely.
All they have to do is to punish in public two of these perpetrators, mm-hmm. and the rest will learn their lessons, but they don't. So I think, unfortunately, unless there is a huge pressure by the international community, and especially since the Taliban are economically in a difficult condition, in a dire condition, unless there is such a pressure, I don't see the future of women any different than what we saw between 96 and 2001. I'm sorry to sound depressing, but that's the
that's the reality. I mean, it's always bothered me, Haleh, that women have to, adjust their life in order for men not to attack or harass or assault. And it really brings me back to what happened in Pakistan just last week, I believe, when 400 men attacked a woman. And I understand that there's outrage within Pakistan and within the world, but what responsibility do men have? I mean, are they just beasts that can't be controlled? And we have to protect ourselves from them. And it's a struggle that I've had over the years of what role do men have in women's empowerment and women's rights. And I believe that without their support, we're not, the road will be even tougher to get to.
Look, Mani, we live in a patriarchal society, whether we like it or not. We live in a culture that prefers men to women, look at men as the decision maker, the breadwinner, and they have the final say on the destiny of women. So we have to take that into consideration, and this hasn't changed. And they have been helped over the centuries by the laws governing the personal status law in our part of the world, in the region, and which again gives the right to men to, if they want to divorce their wife, to get more than one wife, to decide to, they get the child custody, etc., etc., etc. But I think on top of all these things, you suddenly have a generation of women who are economically independent. And I think that is something that the men cannot swallow. Honestly, this is my personal belief, that when they see a woman working, I mean, this girl in that park in Lahore, Pakistan, she was making a video. She was filming with her. You see what I mean? She was not running around in shorts and t-shirts in a park. No, she was working. And I think the economic independence of women is still difficult to accept by the majority of less educated men in our region. You know, it's okay if the woman works and brings money in and hands it over to the husband. That's fine, that's acceptable, no matter what the job is, whether it's in informal, section or formal, doesn't matter. But basically, it is this concept that by becoming economically independent, by being educated, they will no longer be submissive to the man in the family. I think that is the reason, but it won't last long because, the women will push. You saw that this woman went and complained about 300 policemen to the 300 of the people who assaulted her to the police. Nobody knows who these 300 are. They have arrested a bunch of them, but that's it. But still, she was bold enough to go and wage a complaint.
Definitely. I mean, I just can't imagine that out of these 400 men, no one thought this is wrong. I think that's one of the biggest things that really upsets me and horrifies me about the situation. 400 men didn't think what they were doing was wrong, didn't say, hey guys, let's stop this nonsense. And it's infuriating. And it's only because you're a woman. And that's something that I just can't wrap my head around. And I don't know, I mean, I'm coming from a place of privilege. I'm sitting here in Los Angeles, talking to you on Zoom. And I have to keep reminding myself that this is not the reality, obviously, of what 90% of the world, or at least 90% of our region. But that takes me back. That takes me to my next question for you: is the brunt of the pandemic? Women have borne that, obviously, not only in the region but worldwide. So either they've lost their jobs, they've resigned to take care of their school-aged children, or they're being forced to stay home with their tormentors, whether it's their husbands, brothers, uncles, sons even, although that's probably not as bad. But how serious do you think the pandemic's effect on women working in the region? Do you think we'll ever recover, basically, from it?
Look, the women in our region never had the luxury not to recover from, and seriously, I'm not being facetious. No, they never had the luxury to not to recover. They would, they were thrown on the ground and they got up because they have this sense of responsibility. They feel responsible for the family, and they even feel responsible, quote unquote, for their tormentor, because, and I just think that the women, although the number of men who died from COVID is more than women in our region, but the women have suffered much more because they not only, as you said, lost their job or were forced to work from home, but they had to look after the children and also protect the children because, there was not only the husband or the father or the brother would commit violence against them, but it was against the children too. So they had to be a protector of the children too. The number, apparently, of calls to these centers that you could report if somebody was violent in your household against you was unbelievable. I mean, across the region, and Mani, you know the region very well. You know how much the problem of shame, matters, and your integrity. So if you call and say, my husband beat me up for the 5th time in front of the children, it is like, you are dying of shame, but you don't have any other recourse. You have to say that. I just think that after the pandemic is subsided, then we will see across the region in the countries that have not yet a bill or a law to fight violence against women be passed. That is going to be one result. I think the second thing is that more women will go out and try and find a job because it shows to them this being the lockdown and the pandemic showed that how vulnerable they are, and they have to work and even save more, and so I just think that the pandemic has taught a lesson to women, but the men have not learned anything, and they will continue their behavior, unfortunately. But the younger generation, no, I exclude the younger educated generation. Yeah. I think the boys and the girls are the same, more or less.
I'm glad you touched on the taboo subject of a sexual assault or even harassment in the Middle East. I know the Me Too movement has altered some aspects of women's lives in America and Western culture. However, discussing assault is just unheard of in the Middle East because you're not only trying to protect your family's reputation, but I know I heard this growing up is you have to think about your uncles and your aunts and your cousins and what are they going to say, what are they going to do, and you live a life of fear almost of not wanting to rock the boat in any way, but there is sexual assault in the Middle East. But do you see a role for women in our region in the Me Too movement?
Honor killing.
Yes.
Honor killing is now across the board everywhere, in every country in the Middle East. I don't recall really as many honor killings in the pre-revolutionary period in Iran as I have read since. But, and I think that it took maybe 2 years or 3 years for the Me Too movement to make its way to the Middle East, but it is still online. You see what I mean? And now you see more and more young women across the Middle East going online and talking to their friend and talking about the sexual assault that they were, they had witnessed as a child, as an adolescent, or as a young person. So, and some of these women, at least I've seen examples in Iran, have been bold enough to come out and just go and talk to the police. But the police are reluctant to deal with these issues still in the region. I mean, if it's not the family that wants to sweep it under the carpet, it's the police to sweep it under the carpet, but they can't. As I was telling you, I think two things have made all the difference for women to become more outspoken. One is being educated, which gives them a self-assurance because they think that they can earn their own living. And the other thing is social media. Social media has opened a wide world to them. In the past, we would go and speak to one friend or to our aunt, and that was the beginning and the end. Now, you have a network of friends, and you necessarily don't know who they are, but you share that affinity, you share the same experience, and you exchange, and it does make a difference because you are not the only person. There are others who underwent this, and that makes a big difference. So in the next few years, we will hear more and more many young people coming out with their stories.
I think so too. I think I think in the respect of harassment or assault, I feel that the younger generation definitely feels more empowered to speak up. And even if it's incognito online, at least they're speaking up, which gives me hope. So my last question to you, and thank you so much for taking this time to talk with me. But imagine if you had a room filled with young activist women from every country in the region. What, in your lifetime experiences, what you've been through, what advice would you give them to continue the good fight? To get into that good trouble.
That's good. And seriously, if I was in a room with a group of young activists from the region, I would say, the key to their emancipation and equality is a reform in personal status law in every country, every single country. And there is no half-baked things, You either get the right of divorce or you don't, I mean, you just don't have to have 50 different conditions that he will desert you, he will beat you, he will almost kill you, he will grab the child, he will molest it, I mean, that, for example, or among the personal status law, raising the age of marriage for girls to 18, for boys to 21. So, that's it. Or I personally don't believe, in polygamy. I mean, if you want to marry another one, divorce this wife and let her go after. I mean, tackle the personal status law. That is because the personal status law is based on not a secular law, but basically it's on religious law. And this has to change. This has to change, and it is doable because Tunisia did it and the world didn't come to an end,
Yeah,
Tunisia has the best personal status law now for decades and decades.
Mhm.
For example, Iran before the revolution had an acceptable personal status law, but we
Mhm.
don't have even that now. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
would be my advice to them. Number two, don't be afraid. Just push, push, push till you get all the rights, but focus on education and focus on economic independence.
Yes. Thank you, Haleh. Oh my God, I could talk to you for hours.
It was wonderful. Thank you.
And I really mean it. You have been such a wonderful presence in my life. And I was, when I first met you, I wasn't as outspoken and as confident as I am now. And you are one of the reasons why I am where I am and who I am today. So thank you. And on behalf of the CMED team, I want to thank you as well. That was such an amazing discussion, and we really appreciate your willingness to answer all my questions. And I hope I didn't forget anything, but maybe we can do a CMED Chats part 2. Who knows? So CMED has many exciting programs coming up and planned in the coming months. If you're interested in learning more, sign up for our mailing list, shared on the screen and in the chat window. Again, thank you very much, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.